Welcome. We're so glad you're here to join us for our next edition of the 49er Industry Chats. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I am the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Cal State Long Beach. Before we start our session and introduce our next speaker, just want to let you know this session is being recorded and it will live on our website at csuob.edu/alumni for future reference and sharing. Also, if you have any questions for our speaker today, please make sure that you enter them in our Q&A box, as this allows us to better keep track of the questions that get answered. And now I would like to introduce Lucia Cost, who graduated in 1975 from the College of Liberal Arts with a degree in Spanish and was recognized as a distinguished alumna in 2005, and now serves on the Alumni Council as one of our board members. Thank you so much, Lucia, for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. And I'm really happy to introduce our speaker for today. It's Dr. Richard Findlay, and he's a proud CSULB alum and earned his BA in psychology in 1979. He's also the proud parent of a double CSULB graduate class of 2013 and 2015. It's his daughter. Dr. Findlay has built his career as a community, clinical, and health psychologist, and has worked in various capacities with the U.S. Justice Department, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and he's recognized nationally for his work in the field of substance abuse treatment, inmate rehabilitation, and in more recent years, his private practice has shifted toward family therapy and college students at various campuses. In his free time, Dr. Findlay manages a light jazz band and creates music from his in-home studio. So joining us from rural central Pennsylvania on his birthday, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Richard Findlay. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all the people making this possible, and to all the staff and professors and everybody at CSULB. It was a life changer for me. When I was a young man, I arrived in Southern Cal and was not exactly sure who I was or where I was going. And the staff at CSULB were very instrumental in helping me find my way. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Yeah, I'm here right now in Lewisburg, PA, and I can give a little talk up front here about myself, but I would really like to answer as many questions as possible out there. And I thought, of all the things that a person could say, what would be the thing to encourage other mental health professionals to forge on? And, I came up with just a brief bio, and then thought maybe the best thing would be to take questions so we could be real specific. Back in the day, I was actually going for a degree in zoology and got my first 2 years through through Long Beach City College, actually, before coming to Cal State. And when I arrived, I was actually thinking of physiology as a major. And I had to take a psychology class, and just fell in love with the field. And it really helps me to shift my focus to the clinical world. And it turns out that I had about half of my units in physiology and half in psychology. And the institution was nice enough to let me merge the two and to get the first degree in biopsychology. And I don't know if that took off or not, but it was a fascinating education. And so then when you have a BA in psych, the question is, like, what do you do with it? You can't develop your own practice. You can't go write a book necessarily. It's not a whole lot of experience acquired. And I thought the best thing to do, and I still feel strongly about this, is to get as much real world experience as possible. Not only does it make you more educated about the content, but it makes you a more rounded person. So when you're working with clients in the clinical population, you have a good fund of knowledge to fall back upon, and you can really relate to people on their terms. one of the biggest and best things as a psychologist is to have empathy. And when you've actually walked in those shoes, even if for a short time, it really helps you to get a lot of empathy. I actually arrived in California. I was wearing a hooded snow parka. I came out of the mountains in December, and it was snowing and blizzards and everything. And I couldn't find the Pacific Ocean. I was so excited to get to California. I didn't realize the ocean was on the south. So I'm driving back and forth, and I had to get established. And so I wound up actually living in the parking lot of CSULB for a while. So it's so I feel like I've come a long way since then. I actually have an office and indoor plumbing and things like that. So I'm grateful. But with the degree, with the BA in psychology, I was able to go work at a community mental health center. This was the Johnson unit up in Eugene, Oregon. And I started on the night shift because that was the only job I could get. You know, at the time, the market in psychology was pretty flooded. And at first I was a little bit dismayed, the night shift and you know, this was difficult. But the experience, there's things that happen on the night shift that just don't happen during the day. So it turned out to be an enriched experience. And a lot of those classes that I learned from the clinical, the classwork and all the professors who were sharing their expertise became more real. And to actually see people with, you know, hebephrenic, schizophrenic disorders, or to see people with drug addiction and these disorders was, you know, it was heartening that they would trust us with those stories. And the staff, they were very, very supportive. So if you have the inclination to become a community psychologist or a clinical psychologist, I think getting experience in the field, and actually if you're in school and can get experience over at the VA or, you know, even volunteering somewhere, I think that's priceless. And so being authentic, being involved in life, and following those good directives of people like Abraham Maslow, Erickson, you know, you have to get your mastery and develop it and then move on to the next step. You know, the road less traveled kind of experiences. I encourage people to really join life, to not be scared by those inhibitions. And once you participate and get your feet wet, and you'll find that the mental health staff, as a rule, were generally extremely supportive and nurturing for young clinical professionals.
So Dr. Findlay, before you went to that first job, I noticed that while you were at Cal State Long Beach, you were helping by doing some administration and data collection, and so was that an internship? Perhaps you could kind of tell that to some of our younger alum on how to kind of kickstart before you actually get out into the field.
Sure thing. Back in the day, actually, I was part of the work-study program. I came from a family, blue collar, no money. There were some medical problems. And so it was, you know, make it on your own or don't go. And, you know, I had a lot of emotional support, but the money just wasn't there. So I was blessed to really get some work-study jobs. And I don't know if Dr. Sarah Smith is still there, but she hired me on to do psycholinguistics research. So I was out in the parking lot getting directions and recording things, and she would analyze the data. And that not only put food on the table, but it was great to see real hands-on research. And I was actually the data collector, so it was an honor and a nice introduction. Later on, with the semesters changing, you'd lose your job sometimes for the summers. And so I was looking for another work-study job, and they actually wanted me to go and to sext fleas. The job was over in entomology with one of the entomology professors. And I said, I'm sorry, but this just doesn't appeal to me. and I noticed that on a plaque on the door said neuropsychology. And I thought, well, you know, you got to show up if you're going to get anything in life. And so I found out whose office it was. I believe it was Dr. Kenneth Gregory, who's the department head. And he said, thank God, I've been looking for a work study student. I have all these things to do, and we're dissecting brains. I need somebody to microtome, and then I have an artist to sketch. And for me, this was like, hallelujah, this is great hands-on experience. And he was a great mentor, a very nice guy as well, brilliant in his field. And so summers, I had the opportunity to do that work. And when school came back in session, I'm the guy who caused the evacuation. I accidentally knocked over a bottle of ether. And so they had to clean out a couple of classrooms. But it was hands-on learning. And everybody was very patient with me. So that was very nice.
So doctor, you sound like you look for a connection somewhere. For those of us, or not me, but others that may have they're shyer, they're kind of tentative about just going out and looking for things. Can you suggest any kind of associations that are around now that can help them kind of kickstart that networking and kind of stepping out of that box and looking for things?
Yeah, actually, right now, the American Psychological Association has student membership. And with that, there's actually some scholarship money. You can get mentored by people. And of course, joining the APA as a student affiliate, you have all of the access to journals. There's a server, a national server that you can connect with and get information, as well as your local state association. And actually, if the social work is present as well, I was particularly impressed by the social workers website. It was remarkable and has great links and information. People looking for postdocs or for graduate work and experiences. So I'd say those two would be amazingly good resources. The VA, which is not too far from CSULB, I was constantly knocking on their doors, and when I was there, it was post-Vietnam. We had some PTSD work going on at different sites in the country, and unfortunately, I could not get employed by them. They wanted more hours than what I had available. But I would certainly go to local hospitals as well, even if you're not working in the psychology department. Having access to those professionals in that system of administration, I found it very enriching. When I worked, one of my last jobs when I was at Cal State Long Beach was working for Long Beach Memorial Hospital. And I landed a job in the surgery department as an orderly. And along the way, I had acquired an EMT from some electives. I used them to get an applied job. And so I actually got to see brain operations and to see the whole, working of a surgery department. It was fascinating education. And so with these different types of jobs, I along the line, I created, it's kind of a joke started off with, but now I feel pretty good about this. 3 rules. I call them Findlay's rules, right? There's only 3 of them. One is don't make anything worse. No drug addiction, don't get anybody in trouble or with the law, or, keep it clean and authentic, especially if you're going to get a government job later on. When I went to work for the Bureau of Prisons, they did a security check back to my kindergarten years. No exaggeration. But the rules being, number 1, don't make anything worse. Number 2 is you have to show up. In America, there's opportunities like all over the place. And even in small rural communities, you can get online and join people and organizations. And there's a lot of opportunities if you reach out. And of course, the 3rd rule is don't bite off more than you can chew. and you got to know when to take care of yourself and to particularly if you're going into graduate school, to really pace yourself and to get your support and your help from your people too.
So I noticed you also work with the American Red Cross. So you really are moving into those organizations where you can learn a little bit and connect with others, you know?
Yeah, I joined, Red Cross has a division in not just collecting blood, but they have a division called Disaster Mental Health Services. So whenever there's a flood, famine, a hurricane, or something on a large scale, those staff who are trained and prepared ahead of time are sometimes the first responders, providing, you know, food and basic needs, and also mental health resources. So the Red Cross, I speak very highly of them, as well as the United Way organizations. There's hundreds of them in your community, and to engage and to get involved, again, there's a synergy that happens when you show up. So I very much encourage people to volunteer, get part-time work, or do what you can do while you're in school. And if there's any downtime while you're waiting for another job, there's plenty to do that can help you become an authentic person and relate to others better.
Right.
So moving forward, up in Oregon, and after that, I was somewhat torn between physiology and psychology, but that working at a mental health unit nailed it down for me. It was actually a milieu treatment center, so patients would all come together in a large group, and it was a therapeutic community, and it was extremely impressive. Back in the day, there was some stigma about mental health patients, and we didn't have, you know, presidents' wives coming out and saying this or that, or about their anxiety or alcoholism and things. And when I could see people, their compassion, patients helping patients, and their brilliance and their artistic abilities, it really opened my eyes and helped me to have a passion for the field. So on to my master's we went. And I decided to stair step it because money didn't grow on trees back in the day. And I thought, well, if I get my master's, that's something. And then we'll go on. And so it was off to Cullowhee, North Carolina, Western Carolina University. And that was fascinating to be there as well. Did testing in the communities. It was a Rocky Mountain community. And essentially, a lot of good assessment learning and internships that went with that. Then moving along, that was secured, back to San Diego, California, to Alliant University. And that was a very applied PhD degree, both on the research side as well as on the clinical side. And with the needing to work on the side, the market was saturated, so I got a job. I had my master's in psychology, but was working as a swimming pool creepy crawly cleaner, you know, one of those skimmers. And I felt completely demoralized. But then I was realizing I was really learning a lot about people. And back in the day, anybody who had one of these swimming pool systems, they were very well to do. And I learned about some of the behind the scenes struggles, and that money does not equal happiness. And so that was a great education as well. Eventually got work at Scripps McDonald Center as an adolescent drug abuse therapist, and worked there a number of years during my PhD program. And sometimes I wondered, you know, it was like priceless information. I learned about 12-step programming, learned about family therapy, alcoholism dynamics, and that was a great supplement to my education.
Dr. Findlay, I think what you're talking about right now really is finding the connections in any kind of walk of life. And we had a question from someone that is a, let me see here. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Oh, great.
And she works with severely mental ill clients. So she feels like she's super burned out. So what would you suggest in terms of, even though she loves that population, and it's quite challenging. How do you stay motivated, or do you, what would be your suggestions? Because you've worked at quite a few places in different areas.
Yeah, I actually had gotten burnt out really, really bad on the substance abuse field. And it was just so much, and the intensity of the abuse, little kids addicted to drugs, it was a burnout. And so I understand that. One of the things that really helps to have an MFT degree is you can do other types of work as well. And I'm not sure if she's working for an agency or not. And I really believe in paying it back. So I worked for the Bureau of Prisons and things like this. And again, there's a point when you have to say, I got to coast for a little bit. And so some people will shift off and do writing or research and take a break. There was a point in time where I had to get away from it, and I did more work with adolescents. And I went through a phase where I was working behavioral medicine. I'd taken training, biofeedback training. I mentioned I met Dr. Green at CSULB, and so diversifying a little bit really helps. From industrial organizational psychology, we learned that job enrichment and job enhancement can be wonderful, and not to be afraid to take some seminars, get those CEUs, and then diversify. It could be half of your casework, could be in a new field that you're learning and growing, and you're excited for a new population. Sometimes when we get refreshed, we can come back to that original population with new skills that we can incorporate from other fields.
So perhaps this is a good time to find out if your work with your jazz group helps you also kind of refresh your brain and relax.
Yeah, initially it was to support my way through school, but I learned a lot about drug addiction in disasters. I had, when you play in different groups, we had a bass player who was addicted to heroin. He eventually was losing his vision. There was a person who had overdosed and died, a friend of his, and so it was a real internship, and actually very stressful initially. but later on, now I go in the studio and it's my zen. It's my therapy. It takes me into the alpha state, and I'm with some wonderful people that I've met along the way, real kindred spirits. So to have, if not your own therapy, collegial support is very important, and also to have some hobby and escape can be really super helpful, whether it's through religion or spiritual activities or nature, or just good people to be around. You got to think of it as an investment in your operation to take care of yourself.
Great.
So when you're in clinical psychology and marriage and MFT, marriage and family therapy, as well as social work, what I've found over the years is that these folks a lot of times have sometimes very some folks are very narrow. They like to do research or work with one population. In the community model, it's a little bit different. You're working with here in a rural area. When I first came here, there were not many psychologists at all. So there was no such thing as calling up the expert down the street or doing that referral. You were it. So you learned it. You got you contacted your colleagues, or did your research, read it, and did competency, and still looked for referrals and try to get the best person for the client. But in the community model, it's wonderful. For example, I wind up working with a lot of musicians. I can't work with, have dual relationships, but my name got known in the music world as a good go-to person because he gets us. And when you do diversify like that in your community, I call it becoming real, becoming authentic. As our, post-60s therapists, Eric Fromm and those folks would all write about, M. Scott Peck, becoming authentic and working your way up Maslow's hierarchy, you know. If you're in the field, you work to a place where you're not just working for income, but you really are invested in your community. And you got to protect yourself too, don't get me wrong, but that synergy of being engaged in different organizations in different ways, I find that somewhat an assurance to prevent burnout, because there's a variety of client disorders. But also it's very enriching, and it opens your eyes up to the world of authentic diversity. You know, a lot of times these days, you know, I'm an old white guy now, but people, when they realize that you've worked delivering the LA Times, or that you worked in warehouses, it's people can then relate to you. I still have an old Volkswagen bus I work on myself, and so the car buffs, you know, we can talk, and you get validation. So I really, really like it when you relate on that level. Therapy, it transcends just going through the motions. You know, you get trust and connection.
Doctor, we've gotten a question about what are some of the unique challenges in working with the substance abuse population, especially what to look for and be careful with?
Yeah, if you work in the substance abuse field, pretty quickly you'll pick up HOW. It's like honesty is the foundation of change, open-mindedness and willingness. And one of the terrible things about people struggle with recovery is that they can't be honest. There's secrets in hiding the disorder, and that just layers problems. With the illicit drugs, then there's legal complications, and then sometimes moral implications of dealing and illegality and things like this. So I would say that's probably one of the toughest things to break through, because denial is also inherent in substance abuse. Frequently there's families that there's an alcoholic raging and problems and abuse, and nobody wants to deal with it. It's like the no talk rule. Nobody wants to address the elephant in the living room. And so I would say that's extremely challenging. Another problem is a lot of people who have substance abuse problems, they're indigent, they've lost a lot of resource. So their trust is not very good. And sometimes they don't even have insurance. And so you're working, and you know, sometimes they don't show up for their appointments, you know. You bend over backwards to help them and they don't show up. It's like, great. So it takes a lot of patience, and to help them get to the admission stage is tremendously rewarding. And so I would say it's worth it in many cases. But the codependency, the enabling spouses sometimes can be, you know, the family dynamics can be pretty terrible. And it can take a lot out of you to see kids getting involved sexually in the community for drugs and things like this. It's a burnout job. And so, you know, it's political. I volunteered with our Union County Commissioners. We had several opiate deaths, even out here in this community. But when he got voted out and a new county commissioner came in, the program was washed, and we didn't have the funding. And there's a lot of mental health issues right now that are epidemic and have always been epidemic, with lots of deaths and all kinds of problems. And mental health is, we didn't get the Parity Act till quite a ways down my career, that it would get, mental health would have the same insurance benefits as physical health. And still, there's some places where that's still shaky.
Do you want to share a little bit about maybe circumstances where you had to literally just walk away from something?
There was a couple of cases where I felt like I wasn't the right therapist. And there were some transgendered clients when I was in Burlington, Vermont. like I can work with anybody. I love people of all different, I love working, getting to know people. But at the time, the AIDS epidemic was on, and they would not control some of the acting out that was going on. And I felt like I was somewhat enabling that. And so I couldn't endorse it. And I said, I can't, unless you do these behaviors, I can't work with you. And that was a deal breaker. And so sometimes your ethics will dictate what you can tolerate in the client population. You know, sometimes when you see abuse, it can be, you know, when you're working with the perpetrator, these rage disorders and they wife beat or vice versa, those can be very, very difficult. You know, there's some people who do amazingly well, and you know, there's others that you just know that you're not the therapist for them. You need to know to get them referred somewhere else.
So based on what we've read about you, one of the earlier questions was, how did you pivot kind of from all these other areas into doing work with students? Are they clients, or are you, is it an educational process, or how are you working with them?
When I was getting my master's degree, actually, one of my rotations was a pre-doc, and then we had kind of a postdoc internship thing for the master's level. And I got to work at a college mental health center. All the adjustment issues of boyfriend, girlfriend issues, and, you know, I'm going to shoot myself because I can't get through accounting, you know, in substance abuse, some of those issues. And so that the staff were amazing there. One of my supervisors is a social worker, so I always thank you, social workers. She really impressed me with her skill set. But having exposure to that population, when I moved here, my office is about a stone's throw from a major university, and my reputation kind of connected me eventually. And for the longer term, more chronic cases, the staff would refer those away. And over the years of working through and building trust and getting to know the staff, I became a regular. And again, some of that was synergistic, just through other volunteer and other associations, and it was a good click. And so having that academic experience really was a good springboard for that.
And as a community and health psychologist, how do you get your referrals?
Actually, for about the last 15 years, the medical community has referred to me in word of mouth. So I've had a waiting list of maybe about sometimes up to 3 months. And I try to refer people away going, hey, don't wait. But I have blessed with a good following and a good reputation. And but when I was first starting off, it wasn't that easy. and so I would say for any young mental health professional, if you can get a niche area that you can get excited about. I was working for, I worked with a group in Vermont. That was my postdoc. I eventually hired on, and I sent out flyers to their local physicians that I was doing an anti-anxiety group with biofeedback and things like this. And I actually would sometimes go and have sessions in their facility. And so I say to make flyers, put them up, call the medical community, reach out to other professionals. Right now, for example, if anybody wants to move here, we need people to do child custody evaluations big time. You know, it's in terms of referrals, getting a niche area, we can do groups as well, would be a wonderful place to start. And even if you're calling around, if you're not feeling so sure about your expertise with your BA or early career, go to a number of seminars, train up, talk to people, network, sometimes co-facilitate with somebody who's been doing it for a while. And that will get you your rhythm, your forms, your routine, and it's a great way to get your career started. And you know, just make sure you're competent and take some seminars and coursework if you need to.
So in the area of community psychology, has the COVID crisis thrown anything new at you?
That's a great question. This past few years, tensions have ramped up. There's been a lot of issues around political differences. And then there's been a lot of awareness in racial tension issues. So it's creating like this plywood thing. And then when the COVID hit, it was kind of like this three-dimensional stress level. I would say that for the average family in central Pennsylvania, ambient stress has come up about 20%. When stress happens, people's character styles polarize. So people might have obsessive compulsive features. Now they might actually become OCD traits, or maybe the disorder. People who are a little bit more shy or schizoid, they might retreat a little bit more. So with the heightened stress and with the COVID and people sequestering and the anxieties and the economic issues of maybe losing your waitressing job or you know, having to telecommute or not knowing if the university is going to come back in or not. These are all very real issues. And so the adjustment disorder issues, the situational anxiety and depression issues have layered on top of the marital issues, or on top of the single parenting issues, or on top of the migraine headache disorders, or you know, other GI or back problems or whatever. So there's been a negative synergy developing. Now, I'm an optimist, and I admit it, maybe a little bit naively so sometimes. But crisis stirs things up. It's kind of like getting the bottom, the sediment up, and helping us to look at things in a new way. So I am optimistic that, for example, now Zoom technology allows us to have this meeting. Zoom is not HIPAA secure, so we use DoxyMe or another platform. But then that allows more people now to get therapy. One of the positive things of COVID has been that states now are allowing, it used to be you're licensed in PA, that's where you work. And forget it, you could get actually fined or get in trouble by doing any clinical work out of state unless you got licensed there as well. But now the boundaries have come down and we can do teletherapy remotely if people have to move to relocate until they get their new therapist. So that's been a real plus. I had to look outside to see if hell actually froze over because insurance companies were waiving copays now, some of them. And it was like a wonderful thing, and I give hats off to those companies who are doing that. And so with the stress factors, the stirring up of things, the new paradigm, a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of clients. This is a rural area. They need to meet people that come here with university jobs, professors or whatever. And how do you meet people in a pandemic? You know, it's very challenging. So we've had to put on our thinking caps and network and turn to national resources even. And so it's been quite challenging, and we're still working at it. But I would give hats off to the state psychological associations have been amazing. The American Psychological Association has been remarkable in facilitating and getting us all ethical, and how do you do this and deliver teletherapy in an ethical manner. You know, because if you have a complication, you know, you're not there with your client, you might need to make sure they're safe or these challenges.
So have you seen an increase in your patients and appointments because of COVID and all these other issues you've talked about?
Well, actually, I've been booked with a waiting list for about 15 years. but the urgency has increased. It's kind of a lot more calls are like, this straw is about to break the camel's back, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's been a lot more of that.
So where would you see the, for some of the younger alum or even the older alum that are on board right now, as something kind of opening up more, because there's going to be a new normal. This is not going to be what it was before. And so we'd like to hear what you think about that too.
Well, you know, I'm in the boat with everybody else. Maybe being, I'm a little bit active in my psychological services on the server. You can talk, which is a very nice thing for any professional to have your state agency support. And so that exchanging ideas and using resources and finding out, you know, how do you set this up? How do you charge? Where do you get your payment now? The client never comes to your office. What do you do? And or what are the insurance company regulation changes? But I'm excited, and I would encourage any alums in the mental health field to lobby for parity, mental health parity, to lobby for, and it's probably preaching to the choir, but to actually get engaged if you haven't done so yet, and to vote for those candidates who are pro mental health treatment, and not just people are not disposable.
And we've had a few people that have worked with the homeless, and I guess a major question there is, how can you help someone who doesn't want your help, that are like out in the streets? What do you do with those folks?
There's actually a lot of wonderful volunteer efforts going on, delivering food and support resources to the indigent. Now, many of them, a lot of the homeless I researched this because I was outraged at the number of homeless people on the streets when I visit different cities. But I found out that a lot of them are there by choice, refusing to take meds and being non-compliant with family rules and regulations. And that's a whole other subject, but there's some wonderful agencies like the Salvation Army. There's the Goodwill organizations. There's a lot of agencies that actually deliver services to those folks. And so either by direct volunteerism, financial contributions, or actually engaging for lobbying efforts. Right now, I've had a number of clients, for example, they have had intellectually challenged, children, whether they're MR or they have other deficits. And now, you have a short mom, maybe, 4'8", and this young man has grown up, who's maybe 6'2" now, and is operating on the level of, say, a 4-year-old, and there's no resources for these people. So how is this even possible? You think about America, and I get angry and I start foaming at the mouth when I get into this. But to be politically active, and this is an election year, so it's my encourage people to vote and to look at mental health as a huge issue that needs a lot of attention right now. And if we don't do it, my fear is that it won't get done. Squeaky wheel gets the grease in politics. And I'm heartened to see marches in the streets and people, standing up for good rights and good causes and all kinds of equality issues. I was there back in the day when the Equal Rights Amendment didn't pass. I just about had a stroke. It's like, what's wrong with this? How could this be? So yeah, I would say get politically active and engage, and maybe even run for office. Go for it.
I have a question here about you take insurance. How do you work that out? Do you have like a sliding scale? How do you work with people that are indigent and they don't have any money? They don't have insurance.
Yeah, that's a big issue right now. There is a great heterogeneity in terms of socioeconomic strata of clients who come into the office. And so it's really nice to just get paid for what you do. but I found out early that it helps, for example, to get credentialed by the National Register helps for a number of different reasons. But also to get credentialed by insurance companies early in your career. And some of them, I'll just say it, they're corrupt and they're in it for profit, and patients get screwed on a regular basis. Excuse my language, but that's how the authentic feeling is. And so as a community psychologist, I proportion my caseload. I shouldn't broadcast this probably to the world, but I see some gratis clients, and the fear is that then everybody will come to you and you'll go broke. But I keep a number of hours available for gratis clients. I think every professional should do that, as well as volunteer for your community. But then paying the bills, connect with your insurance companies, and anybody can back channel me if they ever have a question about how to do that. But I would say get credentialed early in your career. And in terms of payment, it's very confusing, and frankly, sometimes the cards are mislabeled. I'm in network for, say, the Orange Company. I'll make up a name. And then you get a card. It says the Orange Company, and you go then to do the billing to the mailing address on the back and all of that. Then you get it back that, well, this is a subsidiary, and you're not in network with us. And you know, that's where all my hair went. I think I pulled it all out over the years of going like, how could we be so corrupt in this regard for mental health people? Insurance reform, get on your state insurance committee. And California has been great about that, by the way. A lot of us have benefited from California standing strong to keep insurance companies ethical. And some of them are actually wonderful insurance companies and great examples leading the way. But like anything, you get you good and you mixed, you know.
Can I ask you a question about work-life balance? As I know you have a family, and sounds like your family's grown, but you know, they're not young children, but
yeah,
if that happened at some point coming up, and what would be your advice for some of the folks out here that are doing, you know, in the middle of that right now?
well, sure. Actually, both my daughters attended CSULB. I have an older one now who's quite doing great in the entertainment industry. And my younger ones, I'm very proud of both of them. She's working as a music teacher. And I always told them when they're taking their academics, you know, people can argue with this, but I said, I don't need you to get A's. If you're going to like participate in sports, you're going to do some volunteer work, you're going to, you know, have a job, you know, I'll be really happy with B's. You know, if you can get A's and do all that, great. And I say the same thing to professionals, to really live life, and to engage and to be involved on kind of the street level of things, you know, and follow that good advice that we give to everybody, you know. I was impressed by Glasser's reality therapy. I took a class on theories of personalities, and it was all this heady, you know, the object relations and all this, and it was all great. It was fascinating, but when I came to this guy Glasser, instead of doing therapy with individuals, he would get them a job, and you'd see their life transform. He would get them out of their house behind TVs and video games and things and get them in their darn community, and they would become healthy and engaged and have support systems. And I say the same thing to therapists. We have to, for our own well-being, when you're working with illness and stressful disorders and the dark side of life, depression and worse, we really have to also engage in happy activities. So please make sure you get your happy activity.
Well, you just answered the next question about how do you stay optimistic. So my question was going to be, where do therapists go for therapy?
Yeah. The therapists go to therapists, yeah. But you know what's really fun? I was fascinated when I stumbled across, it was at a seminar of all things, solution-focused psychotherapy. I grew up in the disease model we kind of grew out of the medical model. So what's the disorder and what do you try to fix? In the solution-focused models were different. They were optimistic and they were going, let's fix it. Let's not, I mean, you got to go do a good diagnostics, there's no doubt. And psychologists, we're all about testing and all that when we start off. But make sure you put your energy into faith in humanity, really being with the people, you know? And I would say, looking through I like the metaphor of looking through the front window of your car instead of your rear view mirror. And so you get these sayings like, the test of a person's character is not, will they make a mistake, but what do they do about it when they made a mistake? That's a real good, healthy person, you know? So the optimism comes from seeing people get better. And I owe a lot of my mental health, my positive mental health, to those people who worked hard. And the other thing is get the rule of 3. I made this up a long time ago. You got to have 3 good mentors. And they should be older and wiser than yourself, because even though we get into those periods where we think we know it all, we don't, you know. And then there's that, one of my favorite sayings is, don't believe everything you think, right? So 3 good mentors pretty much will keep you in a row. And they don't have to be professional. One should be an older relative or maybe somebody who's gone down that road, you know?
So in this new normal, because I don't know what's going to happen, what comes after this pandemic and everything else that's going on, and the economics too. What are you most excited about in your field? Maybe that's even come out of this crisis, and not part of this crisis, but.
That's a great question. Well, I'm excited about, the field has awakened that people who are in remote areas now can get mental health treatment. There's some people in like really remote rural areas. There's no psychologists up there, you know, or social workers or folks. And so the question used to be, yeah, but what if there's an emergency? You can't treat that patient. You can't follow up with them. What are you going to do? Jump on a plane? But the model right now is shifting that some treatment is better than no treatment. There's some people, I call them progressive. It doesn't necessarily mean they're quote unquote progressives, but they are looking out for all different types of people. You know what I mean? The rural, remote folks, the inner city folks who just don't know where to even go. Some people don't know the difference between a social worker, psychologist, or a therapist, or they don't know what they're looking for. And sometimes it used to be, before mental health parity, they'd come in with an insurance card and they didn't have mental health benefits. And I'm going, how could this even be? You know? So I'm excited with mental health parity, and with, I don't want to get too political, but some people are looking at standardizing the rules. Right now, a lot of my practice, I got to know rules and regulations and credential for like 12 different, maybe sometimes up to 20 different insurance companies. Working with university populations, you're getting, you know, Blue Cross, IBH, UBH, you know, you're getting Blue Cross Blue Shield, Blue Cross Capital Blue. It's like, you know, how do you keep it all straight? It's like, at the end of the day, I'm tired. I don't need, well, thank God my wife helps with some of the billing and things. So I think that a lot of the economy of the resource could be preserved if we streamlined and had, you know, capitalism can be good, but not to the point where you're driving your therapist crazy with paperwork and forms. There's only so many hours in a day, you know?
We've got about 5 minutes left, but I wanted to ask a personal question. When I read about the community psychology, but is there a difference, or do you see a new kind of approach in communal psychology within a community, especially when you've got these these large crises like the pandemic or the, for lack of a better word, the civil rights movement, the new
Yeah.
civil rights movement, because there is a lot of stress and the economy going down the tubes too.
There's quite a few stressors right now. I had the privilege of talking to a Canadian psychologist, and I like that model a lot. And granted, there's some pros and cons, but what they do up there is they have like community centers where you can go in and anybody can get treated. You don't necessarily have to have insurance through your work or something. And it's not like in our country right now, there's a hierarchy of care. People with like the access card or Medi-Cal or whatever it's called these days, I don't know in California anymore, it's been a while, but it's like those people get those newer therapists sometimes, and sometimes the elitist therapists or whatever move on and forget about them. And, so, but I love the model where everybody's equal and you get respect and you get the same quality of service. And they also had volunteers would come in and facilitate groups. Like here we have women in transition, for women who'd be battered and things like this. It's basically community groups, nonprofits. So I'm encouraged by these grassroots organizations that are treating people holistically, treating the whole individual and not just throwing money at it or something, And I'm seeing more, granted, I'm not a child of the 60s, I'm not a hippie or whatever, though the Volkswagen bus thing, but it's like, but there was something about that time, and I'm not talking about the beatniks, I'm talking about the real movement. It was inclusive. And I think that's coming back.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a lot of these chats where you've got a lot of different people coming to the table, learning how to talk to each other without fighting.
Yes, yeah. And one of the beautiful things about music is we can deliver that healthy message. We pick and choose our songs very carefully. We have an African-American vocalist up front who's just remarkable. And we pick and choose our songs with the right message. And so it's like community service, and we're just a small group. We're not buying the bus yet to go on the road, but maybe after retire, I'm just teasing, but it's like, but yeah, that kind of engagement, and you can do that through other ways as well.
So I guess we got a couple of questions here that I think you did cover, but one is specifically, what can I do when I feel overwhelmed about COVID-19 anxiety? And the other one was, you did talk about the Zoom appointments. Are they effective, or do you prefer the in-person appointments? So,
well, there's about the Zoom appointments. Again, just Zoom's not confidential, so we always make sure we have a secure platform. But I do see people's houses. Sometimes they'll show me their artwork or their pets. Sometimes I get a tour and it explains a lot. That picture's worth 1,000 words. When people come to the office now wearing masks, it's impersonal, and we have to sanitize the audience, so the sessions are shorter. So the telemed session, I believe right now, is a wonderful thing. And I have had, aside from technology issues, I have some people remote, and they're coming through satellite dishes and using 486 laptops and stuff. So sometimes, you get to help them get the right equipment, or we will do phone sessions until we get the bugs out. But yeah, so I think that the telemed's good. And I'm sorry, the first part of the question was?
Well, it was just someone that asked, and you could even respond from you, that's in terms of anxiety about COVID-19.
Yeah, a great book, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Primer, is the Feeling Good Handbook. And it walks you through the thinking errors, not to overgeneralize, not to catastrophize, not to use emotional reasoning. in negativistic thinking and discounting the positive, etc. So from the cognitive behavioral, and then to add on other resources as well, but that's a good start.
What was that called? What was
So
that?
the Feeling Good Handbook by David Burns. I'm not a relative. I don't get anything from it. But it's a good primer for cognitive behavioral therapy. And so get your fear into a sentence. I am afraid of going outside of my house because I am afraid I'm going to lose my job because. And then to say, is that rational? What's the actual likelihood? If it was realistic, is there a likelihood? And you know, to look at, then I'm a big person to say have a backup plan. You know, survival of the fittest. We all have to adapt. And so, but I would say engage with the support of others, whether it's through Zoom meetings or calling relatives. And not to try to do it alone. There's tremendous strength in community.
Dr. Findlay, we've gone over time, but do you want to just wrap it up by, you know, in terms of what you needed to say, but also maybe give the listeners a way to contact you, and then we'll turn it over to Noemi again.
Oh, sure thing. It's a tradition among mental health people to mentor the new people upcoming. And so I'm always open to doing that. The best way to get in touch with me is through my email address, which is the abbreviation for psychology doctor. So it's psychdoc, P-S-Y-C-H, then D-O-C. And that's at ptd.net. That's like paulthomasdavid.net. Okay, so psychdoc at ptd.net. You can also look me up. I have a web page through the National Register Service, Richard Findlay, PhD, in Lewisburg. We'll get the correct Richard Findlay. and I'm very open to questions or thoughts or encouragement or ideas about moving forward.
Okay, great. Ricky's put those down. So without further ado, thank you so much, Dr. Findlay. We could probably go for another half hour. Noemi, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Findlay. Thank you, Lucia. Great conversation. And again, just a reminder that this session was recorded and it will live on our website as the address on our screen at csulb.edu/alumni. You can watch it on your own time or forward it to an alumni, student, or friend. Thank you so much. And please remember to follow us on social media at CSULB Alumni to learn about future chats like this. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, CSULB, too.